Hello everybody, welcome back to a brand new video, to episode 4 of the Prime Minister Timeline. If I sound a bit iffy, it's because I'm sick. Again, I don't know what's up with this month, my immune system's been all over the place. But we're going to be doing episode 4 of the Prime Minister Timeline, going through the years of 1851 to 1871. These 2 decades are both very eventful yet uneventful at the same time, and you'll understand what I mean here in a second. Starting off in 1851, there's nothing noteworthy, but 1852, we have the 1852 federal election. The Democratic Republicans under Franklin Pierce end up gaining seats. They end up gaining 28 seats, as well as a plurality, I believe, they win a majority. Forgive me. They win a majority of seats. Franklin Pierce ends up becoming the prime minister, defeating Federalists being led by Winfield Scott, who lose 17 seats. The Real Soul Party, led by John Hale, they lose 3 seats. The Know Nothing Party, led by Joseph Broome, they lose 5 seats. Going into 1853, there is a kind of a legit lack of confidence due to Franklin Pierce's bad luck. He was in a train wreck. Nothing that Pierce does policy-wise causes him to lose a vote of confidence. It's more so his personal life and him not really having the best of luck. Politicians really feel like it's affecting him in his job as serving as prime minister. So a vote of no confidence, where plenty of Democratic Republicans even vote against vote for a lack of confidence in Pierce. Going on to 1854. Pierce does sign the Nebraska-Kansas Act, which does lead to a new political party rising in the United States at this point, heading into the federal election, where the Federalists end up winning the plurality of seats. However, it's a minority government, so it's nothing too big. They still lose seats, and it's not because, they gain seats because the Democratic Republicans lose a shit ton of seats, but Millard Fillmore does end up becoming the next prime minister on a technicality. The Know Nothing Party, led by, I believe, George Washington's great-grandnephew, I think his name was George C. Washington. Washington leading the Know Nothing Party to gaining 51 seats in this election. The Democratic Republicans under Pierce ended up losing 71 seats. Again, nothing Pierce did policy-wise was a reason, just the messaging was really bad, similar to the 2022 midterms this year for Republicans. The new anti-Nebraska Party, a party in sole opposition to the Nebraska-Kansas Act, they're led by Gerrit Smith. They win 22 seats, a gain of 22 seats. A new party, I got hair in my mouth, The Republicans, led by John C. Fremont, they end up gaining 13 seats in their first try. The People's Party, a kind of a mix of the Free Soil and other minor parties, they end up gaining 8 seats, this time led by John Hale. And, of course, Millard Fillmore is elected PM under a minority government. 1855, the California Gold Rush ends. The Yakima War begins. The Seminole War begins, which in our timeline is called the Third Seminole War. But again, we didn't have a First Seminole War, so there's no point in calling it the Third Seminole War. And Prime Minister Fillmore fails a vote of confidence. This is due to polarization, as well as the fact that Federalists have so less seats in the House, or in Congress, I guess. In 1856, the Yakima War does end, which gives a small boost to the Federalists due to it ending in a American victory. But we go on to the federal election. The Democrats, led by James Buchanan, a fresh face to the scene, he ends up leading his party to gaining 42 seats. The Democratic Republicans kind of breaking apart, and other factions forming from it. The Federalists under Millard Fillmore, they end up losing 9 seats, which is a pretty good showing, considering how the country is going forward. The Republicans, they shine really well. They gain 35 seats, winning 48. The Anti-Nebraska Party, led by Gerrit Smith, they lose 12 seats. The Know Nothing Party, led by Andrew Donaldson, they lose 46 seats. Since Washington's retirement, the Know Nothing Party kind of fade away, essentially. And James Buchanan is elected prime minister under a minority government. Going on to 1857, the Panic of 1857 occurs. This, of course, leads to a recession, leading Prime Minister Buchanan to fail a vote of confidence. heading into the 1858 election. The Seminole War ends in an American victory, gives a small boost to Buchanan and the Democrats. However, the Federalists, under Millard Fillmore, they gained just one seat, which that one seat was more than enough to give the Federalists a plurality, with Millard Fillmore once again becoming prime minister. So far the only prime minister to do it non-consecutively. The Republicans under John Fremont, they end up gaining 21 seats, going into second place. The Democrats under Buchanan, they lose 51 seats, a lot of seats to drop them down to 39. The anti-Nebraska Party, under Garrett Smith, they end up gaining 12 seats, kind of hitting their ceiling there. The Opposition Party, which is a pro-slavery party, a pro-secessionist, a pro-secessionist party, they end up gaining seats this election, getting 17 seats. And Millard Fillmore is once again elected prime minister under a minority government. Going on 1859, Pike's Peak Gold Rush occurs, which is a boost to the economy, and Prime Minister Fillmore once again fails a vote of confidence. Going on 1860, we have the Paiute War, which happens throughout this entire year and ends in an American victory, a boost to the Federalists. However, Millard Fillmore is very popular in going on to 1860, and the fact that the opposition to him is very weak. Abraham Lincoln, of course, is seen as this, radical candidate who would break the country apart, kind of like IRL. We have John Breckinridge of the opposition party, again, a radical choice as well that people don't want to vote for unless you lived in the Deep South. And we also have Garrett Smith, who really isn't in contention no matter what. But the Federalists, they end up gaining 28 seats. The Republicans lose 13, the opposition loses 3, and the anti-Nebraska Party loses 20. But the Democrat Party becomes obsolete after this election, losing every single seat they had coming into it, and Millard Fillmore is reelected to a third term, I guess you can say. There isn't a secession crisis because that is avoided due to Millard Fillmore. He's seen as the moderate choice. Is able to work a compromise between all sides going inward. 1861, there's nothing noteworthy. 1862, Prime Minister Fillmore signs the Civil Rights Act of 1862, which outlaws descent-based slavery amongst mixed children. Let's say the father is white and the mother is black. So once that child is born, that child is essentially a freed individual and is not forced into slavery no matter what. However, they, again, being mixed, life's still not great for them, but I guess you could say it's a step in the right direction, I guess. Prime Minister Fillmore, he does sign the Pacific Railways Act, which is the beginning of the transcontinental railroad construction, and we do see a smallpox epidemic come in California around this time. 1863, there's nothing noteworthy. In 1864, Millard Fillmore does the impossible, the shocking, which is run for another term despite serving 8 years already. However, he does sign the Coinage Act of 1864, which puts the words "In God We Trust" on all U.S. currency. However, Fillmore is very popular. He ends up winning the Federalists 40 seats, giving him a good old majority, a healthy majority in Congress. Republicans end up losing 37 seats, giving them 19 seats. And a new party, or essentially a renamed opposition party called the Dixiecrats, they end up winning 19 seats, with Andrew Johnson being their head honcho. And we have a new party, which is the party for radical Republicans who are a bit too radical. John C. Fremont leads that party, leading them to win 4 seats. Millard Fillmore is reelected to another term as prime minister, a shocking turn of events considering he's breaking the 8-year tradition set by the prime ministers before him. 1865, however, he does announce that he will be retiring next year, which is the only big thing to talk about in 1865. 1866, Fillmore does sign the Judicial Circuits Act, which, oh god, I've got really bad whatchamacallit in my chest. Which kind of says Supreme Court, 7 seats, the circuit judge seats, they have these amount of seats. Pretty much sets a seat limit to the judicial courts. Prime Minister Fillmore does sign the Metric Act of 1866, which legalizes the use of the metric system in the country. A weird bill, looking at it from today's perspective. However, the Federalists, now leading by George B. McClellan, do gain seats in this race, in this selection, gaining 13 seats, adding on to their majority. The Republicans, led by Charles Sumner, They end up gaining 22 seats. Lincoln was seen as a really bad choice for Republicans, which is why they ended up losing so many seats about 6 years ago. The Dixiecrats end up losing seats. They lose 4 seats, now at 15, and the Progressives just stay with their measly 4 seats. And George McClellan is elected the Prime Minister with a majority government. 1867, Prime Minister George McClellan does purchase Alaska, which does happen in our timeline, happens here as well. 1868, there's nothing noteworthy. 1869, nothing noteworthy. 1870, the 12th Amendment is ratified, which, if you recall, there was no 12th Amendment, 13th, or 14th. However, the 15th Amendment is still ratified in this timeline, but it's known as the 12th Amendment. The Naturalization Amendment still occurs. Going on to 1870, that federal election, the Federalists, being super popular, end up gaining even more seats, gaining 36 seats. The Dixiecrats end up gaining 7 seats. The Republicans, with Schuyler Colfax, who has a bunch of corruption scandals heading into this election, they lose 29 seats. And the Progressives, which are just a bunch of Republican disaffectors, end up gaining the Progressives 5 seats. And McClellan wins re-election as Prime Minister, keeping his majority government. 1871, there's nothing noteworthy. And that is everything for this episode. Thank you guys so much for watching. Did you enjoy it? I hope so. It's very interesting working on it. But this is the Chaotic One saying, peace.